3 years ago, I stood in a courtroom and watched my entire world crumble. The judge's words echoed in my head as I lost my business, my savings, everything I'd worked for since I was 16. My own family testified against me. But as I walked out of that courthouse with nothing but the clothes on my back, I made myself a promise. I would get it all back, and they would pay for what they did. If you love stories about family betrayal and ultimate revenge, smash that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe, because you won't want to miss how this story ends. Trust me, the ending will shock you. My name is Rebecca, and my story starts when I was just 16 years old. While most teenagers worried about homework, I was already thinking about business. My parents, Catherine and Robert, owned a struggling bakery that barely paid rent. I watched them stress over bills every night. That's when I decided I would never be poor. I started selling homemade cookies to classmates. $5 here, $10 there. By senior year, I had saved $3,000 and started a catering business from our family kitchen. Rebecca, you should focus on school, my mother would say. Business is too risky. But I had a vision beyond their small bakery. I saw possibilities everywhere they saw limitations. My catering business grew slowly. I would wake up at 4 in the morning to prep food, attend school, then spend evenings delivering orders. My younger brother Jake, who was 17, would sometimes help me load my car. "You're insane, Becca," he would laugh. "All this work for a few $100?" He didn't understand. This wasn't about hundreds of dollars. This was about building something bigger than myself. By graduation, my catering business brought in $2,000 monthly. Instead of college, I rented my first commercial kitchen. It was tiny and cramped, but it was mine. I painted the walls and hung a sign. Rebecca's Catering, where every event matters. The first year was brutal. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. But word spread about my quality and service. Local businesses hired me for corporate events. Wedding planners recommended me to clients. By year 3, I had 5 employees and was booked 6 months ahead. But I wasn't satisfied. I saw restaurant owners struggling with unreliable suppliers. I could become more than a caterer. I could supply the entire local food industry. At 22, I took out a $50,000 loan and launched Rebecca's Food Distribution. The risk was enormous, but something inside me knew this was my moment. The distribution business exploded beyond my dreams. Within 6 months, I had contracts with 30 restaurants. Within a year, over 100. By 25, I was making more monthly than my parents made in their lifetime. I bought a 5-bedroom colonial with a pool, drove luxury cars, and wore designer clothes to business meetings. But the real satisfaction was respect. Restaurant owners who once dismissed me as just a kid now called personally for special orders. My family was amazed. I paid generous salaries to my parents to help manage operations. Jake finished college and became my operations manager. We were a real family business built on trust and shared success. By 30, Rebecca's Food Distribution was the largest supplier in our region. We had contracts with hotel chains, hospitals, and national restaurant franchises. My net worth crossed into millions. I invested in real estate, buying properties throughout the city. Apartment buildings, office complexes, retail spaces. Each investment made me wealthier and more secure. Success brought new challenges. Managing a multi-million-dollar company required systems and people I could trust. That's when I made what seemed like the smartest decision of my life, bringing my family deeper into the business. My mother, Catherine, became chief financial officer. My father, Robert, took over human resources. We formed a family corporation with structured ownership. I maintained majority control, but my parents and Jake received significant equity stakes. For 5 more years, everything seemed perfect. I was featured on magazine covers as a young entrepreneur to watch. I bought vacation homes and traveled the world. My family seemed happy, living comfortably in retirement they never could have afforded. But underneath, things were changing. Success brought out sides of my family I never knew existed. Money and power were creating desires and resentments that would eventually destroy everything. The first trouble came during a board meeting when I was 35. We were discussing a major expansion that would double our revenue. I wanted to move aggressively, but my family was hesitant. "Rebecca, you're moving too fast," my mother said. "We need to be more conservative." Jake sided with her. "Maybe we should slow down. Enjoy what we have." I felt strange tension I'd never experienced. This is my company. I'm moving forward with the expansion. The uncomfortable silence that followed was new. After the meeting, Jake stayed behind. "Becca, you can't keep making unilateral decisions. We're partners now, not employees." His words stung. I had always treated my family with respect and generosity, given them equity, excellent salaries, and included them in decisions. But somehow, that wasn't enough anymore. Over the next months, changes accelerated. My mother questioned my financial decisions more aggressively, challenging spending on equipment and marketing. She began copying lawyers on routine correspondence. Jake started missing family dinners and avoiding conversations. His responses became short and defensive. My father seemed caught in the middle, trying to smooth tensions but showing stress. Board meetings turned into arguments. Simple decisions required extensive negotiations. The harmony that defined our family was fracturing. The breaking point came during an argument about hiring. I wanted a new sales director, but my family opposed it. Jake said something I'll never forget. "You act like this company belongs to you, but we built it together. We deserve equal say." "I started this when I was 16, I replied. "You joined after it was successful. There's a difference." "That's ancient history. We're equal partners now." But we weren't equal partners. The legal documents were clear about ownership and voting rights. That structure seemed fair when everyone was happy, but now it created resentment. I suspected my family was meeting without me. Whispered conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Phone calls ended abruptly when I approached. Alliances were forming against me. My accountant noticed irregularities in financial reports, small discrepancies that might have been mistakes. When I brought them to my mother's attention, her explanation seemed evasive. I hired an independent audit firm. This created an uproar. My family accused me of not trusting them, treating them like criminals, but my gut told me trust was exactly what I couldn't afford. The audit revealed concerning patterns in expense categorization and transaction documentation. Auditors recommended stronger internal controls and oversight. My family's reaction was explosive. They accused me of paranoia and threatened to quit if I implemented new procedures. The family business that was my greatest pride became my biggest stress source. I quietly hired attorney Michael Chen to review our corporate documents. What he told me was chilling. Rebecca, if your family wanted to remove you from leadership, the current structure might not protect you as much as you think. My family had enough combined voting power to cause serious problems if they worked together against me. They had access to information and relationships that could be used strategically. I discovered my family had hired their own attorney. When I confronted Jake, he was defensive but not apologetic. We all have the right to legal representation. You hired a lawyer first. I hired a lawyer to understand my own company's structure. Why do you need protection from me? Maybe because you've been acting like our boss instead of our family member. How had we reached a point where my brother saw me as a threat? The business that brought us together was tearing us apart. In an effort to restore peace, I agreed to what I should have recognized as a trap. My family proposed an executive committee with all four of us having equal voting power on major decisions. It's temporary, my mother assured me, just until we work through these issues. Michael Chen strongly advised against this. Don't give them operational control while you retain financial liability. You'll be responsible as majority owner but won't have power to prevent problems. But I was exhausted from fighting my own family. I signed the executive committee agreement on a Friday in April. That weekend, my family seemed relieved and happy. We had a pleasant dinner together for the first time in months. But something felt wrong. They were too relaxed, like they had won something. Monday morning, I walked into my office to find my mother and Jake in a meeting with our finance head and COO. When I tried to join, my mother said it wasn't necessary. Just routine operational issues, executive committee business. That's when I realized what happened. I had given them exactly what they needed to take control without buying me out or lengthy legal battles. Over 2 weeks, I watched helplessly as they systematically changed how the company operated. They renegotiated supplier contracts, adjusted employee responsibilities, and modified customer service procedures. None violated our agreement, but together they transformed my company into something I barely recognized. The trap was perfect. They had found a way to take control without technically stealing it. But they underestimated one thing. I was still the same person who built an empire from nothing. 3 months later came the final betrayal. I arrived at the office to find locks changed and security guards at the entrance. My own employees wouldn't make eye contact as I was escorted to a conference room where my family waited with their attorney. "Rebecca, please sit down," my mother said in a cold, professional voice. Their lawyer, Patricia Williams, slid a thick folder across the table. "Miss Thompson, our investigation has revealed significant financial irregularities in your management. Inside were documents showing unauthorized payments to personal accounts, questionable expenses, and investment decisions that violated fiduciary agreements. But something was wrong. These weren't my transactions. The signatures look like mine, but the handwriting was slightly off." "This is fake," I said, my voice shaking. Patricia smiled coldly. "We have copies of all original paperwork, including security footage of you making these transactions." They showed me bank security footage of me apparently making large withdrawals and signing documents. But the timestamp seemed inconsistent, and my body language looked strange. My mother spoke next. "Rebecca, we discovered you've been stealing from the company for 2 years. You've taken nearly $500,000 while we trusted you completely. Mom, you know this isn't true. You know I would never steal from our family. The evidence is here. We have no choice but to remove you immediately to protect the business. Jake finally looked at me. If you cooperate, we might keep this from becoming criminal. But you need to resign immediately. I called Michael Chen, but it was already too late. They had called emergency board meetings, notified employees about my resignation, and begun damage control with customers. By day's end, I was completely locked out. My access to business accounts was terminated. Company credit cards were canceled. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about my resignation amid financial irregularities. Within a week, the district attorney opened a formal criminal investigation. My personal assets were frozen. The salary I'd paid myself for years stopped immediately. Friends and associates began avoiding me. Invitations to social events stopped. I became a pariah in my own community. The most painful moment came when I ran into my father at the grocery store. Dad, you know me better than anyone. You know I didn't do these things. He looked at me with genuine sadness. Rebecca, I don't know what to believe anymore. The evidence seems clear. Maybe success went to your head. Dad, I'm your daughter. Don't you think you would have noticed if I was stealing? He shook his head slowly. People change, honey. Money changes people. That conversation broke something inside me. If my own father could believe I was capable of betraying our family, maybe I really was as alone as I felt. 6 months later, I was living in a studio apartment that smelled like cigarettes, working retail for $12 an hour. My savings were gone, credit ruined, criminal charges were still pending. The depression was overwhelming. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. I avoided parts of town where I might see former employees or associates. Michael Chen tried to keep my spirits up, but even he seemed discouraged. The evidence they fabricated is sophisticated. Challenging it will require expensive expert witnesses. I don't have hundreds of thousands, I replied. I barely have hundreds. He explained my options: continue fighting and risk going deeper into debt, or accept a settlement requiring me to admit financial irregularities and never work in food service again. But something inside me rebelled. I knew I was innocent. I knew they had destroyed me with lies. I couldn't live with letting them win. I want to keep fighting, but smarter. I need to understand exactly how they did this. That decision changed everything. Instead of just defending, I began investigating how they had framed me so effectively. The first breakthrough came from Maria Santos, my former executive assistant who was still working at the company. She reached out secretly. Rebecca, I know you didn't do what they're saying, but I saw them planning something for months. Maria had noticed secret meetings, documents being copied and removed, conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Most importantly, someone had been accessing my computer after hours when she knew I wasn't there. I began documenting everything Maria told me and found other employees willing to share what they'd observed. A pattern emerged. My family had been planning this takeover for at least a year. Roberto Martinez, our former IT manager fired after my family took control, contacted me because he was angry about his treatment. They asked me to do things with computer systems I wasn't comfortable with. They wanted access to your personal files. When I refused, they got rid of me. Roberto had kept copies of suspicious requests showing attempts to access my private information and modify system logs. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. But proving this would require resources I didn't have. I decided to become my own investigator. I spent days working retail and nights studying law, forensic accounting, and digital investigation. I turned my tiny apartment into a war room with documents, timelines, and evidence charts covering every wall. My family thought they had destroyed me, but they underestimated the same determination that built my empire. The breakthrough came after 3 months of research. I discovered the security footage contained digital artifacts suggesting manipulation. The timestamps were inconsistent, and lighting patterns didn't match other footage from the same day. I reached out to Professor Jennifer Walsh at the local university. She taught digital forensics and might be interested in my case as research. "This is fascinating," she said after reviewing the footage. "Whoever created this was skilled, but made technical errors detectable with the right software." Her graduate students analyzed the evidence and produced a detailed report showing multiple signs of digital manipulation. The security footage that seemed so damning was elaborate fiction. The fake expense reports were easier to disprove. Several receipts were for purchases on days when I could prove I was traveling out of state. Others were for businesses that didn't exist at listed addresses. Most importantly, I discovered that large cash withdrawals attributed to me were actually made by my mother, Catherine. Bank security cameras showed her making transactions while wearing a wig and clothing similar to mine. Getting these bank records required legal subpoenas. When I showed Michael Chen the video analysis and forged receipt documentation, he agreed to pursue it. If you're right, this isn't just civil fraud. This could be criminal conspiracy, identity theft, and wire fraud. The bank records were devastating to my family's case. They showed Catherine making the withdrawals and revealed suspicious activity patterns in months before my removal. With evidence of their fraud, I began investigating their complete strategy. Maria Santos continued providing inside information, documenting suspicious activities. "They're not as careful anymore," she told me. "They think they won completely, so they talk more openly." I learned my family was planning to sell the company within a year, presenting themselves as original founders who rescued the business from my mismanagement. I also discovered Jake was having second thoughts. Maria overheard him arguing with our mother about collateral damage. He seemed bothered by criminal charges he apparently hadn't fully understood. I had Roberto send Jake a carefully worded message about computer security vulnerabilities in company systems. Jake contacted Roberto within days, revealing he was uncomfortable and wanted to make things right without destroying the family. Roberto suggested Jake meet with me privately to discuss damage control before the legal situation spiraled further. The meeting took place at a diner in the next town. Jake looked terrible. He'd lost weight and had dark circles under his eyes. "Becca, I never wanted it to go this far," he said. "Mom said we were just restructuring ownership. She said you were making bad decisions and we needed to protect the business." "Jake, they filed criminal charges against me. They tried to send me to prison." "I know, and I feel sick about it. But Mom says if we back down now, you'll destroy us with lawsuits." I showed him evidence proving I was innocent and communication suggesting he had been manipulated too. "You were used. Mom and Dad planned this carefully but didn't tell you everything." Jake stared at the documents for a long time. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell the truth. In court, under oath, about what really happened." Jake agreed to cooperate under specific conditions: immunity from prosecution and treatment as a victim rather than co-conspirator. My attorney arranged these protections in exchange for his testimony. The FBI's white-collar crime unit took my case seriously. Agent Sarah Martinez was impressed by my documentation. In 20 years investigating corporate fraud, I've rarely seen a victim do such comprehensive work. Your evidence gathering saved us months. Federal investigators found deleted emails showing extensive planning between my parents and their attorney. They uncovered financial records proving systematic movement of company assets into personal accounts. Most damaging were recordings my mother had made of family conversations. She had documented discussions about the plan, probably as insurance against betrayal by other family members. The recordings proved premeditation and showed my parents discussing me like an enemy. They talked about my weaknesses and how to exploit them, planned specific lies, and discussed what to do if I became a problem. Listening to my parents plot against me with such coldness was worse than losing the business. But the recordings provided exactly what I needed to reclaim my company. My attorney filed emergency motions to freeze company assets and restore my leadership pending criminal trial outcomes. Despite my family's aggressive opposition, the judge ruled I should be reinstated as CEO. Walking back into my headquarters after 13 months felt surreal. Many employees avoided eye contact, unsure how to react. Others welcomed me enthusiastically, saying they never believed the accusations. The business was in worse shape than expected. My family had managed for short-term cash flow rather than long-term success, preparing to strip the company for parts rather than grow it. I immediately began implementing changes to repair damage and restore reputation. I reached out personally to lost customers and met with employees to address concerns. The work was challenging because I was simultaneously managing business recovery and preparing for a criminal trial that would determine my future. The criminal trial began on a cold Monday morning. The courthouse was packed with media, business associates, and community members who had followed the story. My parents sat confidently with their legal team, looking composed and respectable. The prosecution laid out the government's case, a calculated scheme to defraud Rebecca Thompson through forged documents, identity theft, and systematic manipulation. The defense strategy was clever. They argued I had been embezzling, and they had discovered this through routine oversight. They claimed evidence of their planning was actually evidence of investigating my alleged crimes. The real victim is not Rebecca Thompson, defense attorney Patricia Williams argued, but family members who trusted her and were betrayed by her greed. The prosecution began with technical evidence. Professor Walsh testified about forged security footage, explaining how videos had been manipulated. FBI experts described fake documents created using my login credentials after hours. Bank evidence was particularly compelling. Security footage showed my mother making withdrawals while disguised as me. The disguise was obvious once you knew what to look for. But the most powerful evidence was the recordings Catherine had made. The jury heard my parents discussing how to neutralize me and make sure she never recovers. When Jake testified as a prosecution witness, the courtroom was silent. He looked directly at our parents as he swore to tell the truth. I thought we were restructuring business ownership, he testified. Mom told me Rebecca was making bad decisions and we needed to protect family assets. I didn't know about forged documents or fake withdrawals until later. Several employees testified about suspicious activities they'd observed. Maria Santos was particularly effective, describing how she'd seen Catherine accessing my computer after hours. The defense tried attacking my character and financial management, but their case fell apart, explaining technical evidence. They couldn't provide plausible explanations for digital manipulation artifacts, Catherine's disguised bank visits, or her recorded voice discussing their plans. When Catherine took the stand, it was a disaster. She was defensive and evasive, claiming not to remember conversations when the prosecutor played her recorded voice. My father was even worse, contradicting Catherine's testimony and seeming confused about basic facts. It became clear he'd been a reluctant participant who didn't fully understand his wife's plan. The most dramatic moment came when the prosecutor asked Catherine directly, "Did you love your daughter when you decided to destroy her life?" Catherine broke down crying and couldn't answer. The jury watched her sob for several minutes while her attorney objected. During closing arguments, the prosecutor emphasized emotional devastation alongside financial crimes. This wasn't just business dispute. This was a family that decided to cannibalize their own daughter for money and power. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all major charges. Catherine was convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and identity theft. Robert was convicted of conspiracy and fraud, but acquitted of identity theft, reflecting the jury's understanding that he'd been manipulated. Catherine received 4 years in federal prison plus restitution. Robert got 2 years probation and community service because of his cooperation. More important than their sentences was what convictions meant for my company. With fraud legally established, all business decisions they'd made after removing me were invalidated. I regained full control and could pursue civil remedies. Standing outside the courthouse after sentencing, I felt vindication mixed with sadness. I had won completely, but victory came at the cost of family relationships. A reporter asked if I felt sorry for my parents. I thought for a long moment before answering. I feel sorry for the people they used to be, but not for the people they chose to become. With criminal convictions secured, I focused on rebuilding what had been destroyed. Civil lawsuits resulted in substantial monetary judgments, though much of what they owed would never be recoverable. More importantly, I had my company back and could repair the damage. The business had lost 30% of its value, but fundamentals were strong. My first priority was rebuilding customer and supplier relationships. Many were eager to work with me again once they understood what really happened. Criminal convictions provided credibility my version of events had previously lacked. "We always wondered about changes your family made," one large restaurant client told me. "They focused on short-term profits rather than long-term relationships that made your company special." I rebuilt my management team and implemented new governance structures to prevent future internal manipulation. I addressed the situation directly in a company-wide meeting. "I know this has been difficult for everyone. We've all been through something that shouldn't happen in any family or business. But we survived, and we're stronger because of what we learned." The honesty helped. Over following months, workplace culture gradually returned to the collegial atmosphere that characterized the company during its best years. Financially, recovery exceeded expectations. Within 6 months, we'd regained most lost customers and attracted new business from competitors who had capitalized on our temporary weakness. I restructured ownership to ensure no family members would ever again have power to remove me from control. I implemented professional management systems and external oversight, making future conspiracies much more difficult. The most satisfying aspect was proving my capabilities to the community that had been quick to believe the worst. Business leaders who had shunned me began reaching out with partnership opportunities. I was invited to speak at conferences about crisis management and family business governance. My story became a business school case study about proper corporate structure and dangers of mixing family dynamics with business operations. Within 2 years of vindication, the company was more successful than ever. We expanded into new markets, launched innovative services, and built a reputation as one of the most ethical companies in our industry. I also helped other entrepreneurs facing similar challenges. I established a legal defense fund for business owners victimized by internal fraud or family betrayal. Personal recovery was more complicated. I had to rebuild my social life and learn to trust again after being betrayed so completely by those closest to me. The relationship with Jake was most complex to navigate. His cooperation had been crucial to vindication, but he was still my brother who had participated in destroying my life. We met for dinner about a year after the trial. He looked healthier, but there was sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I can never undo what happened," he said, "but I think about it every day. Sorry doesn't begin to cover what I feel. Jake, you were manipulated too, but you also made choices. We all have to live with consequences. We didn't rebuild a close relationship, but reached mutual respect and understanding." He moved to another state and started his own business. We exchanged Christmas cards, but the easy camaraderie of our youth was gone forever. My relationship with my parents was completely severed. I never visited them in prison, and we had no contact after release. Some people thought I was too harsh, that families should forgive regardless of circumstances. But I had learned blood relationships don't automatically entitle people to trust or forgiveness. Actions have consequences, and some actions are unforgivable. Today, my company employs over 200 people and generates more than $50 million annually. I own multiple properties again, but more importantly, I own them free and clear. I've learned success isn't just about building wealth or achieving recognition. Real success is building something that can survive betrayal, legal challenges, and personal devastation. It's discovering you're stronger than your worst circumstances. The experience taught me to trust carefully, but not let fear prevent meaningful relationships. I have close friends now who know my full story and accept me for who I am today. I learned justice and revenge are different things. I didn't pursue my family to hurt them. I pursued them to reclaim what was mine and establish truth about what happened. Their consequences were necessary for justice, not a goal itself. Most importantly, I learned losing everything can sometimes be the best thing that happens to you. It strips away illusions and forces you to discover what you're really made of. It teaches you to value genuine relationships over convenient ones. My parents chose money and power over family. They chose deception over honesty. They chose cruelty over love. Those choices defined who they really were when pressure was greatest. I chose to fight, rather than surrender. I chose truth over convenience. I chose justice over bitterness. Those choices defined who I really was when everything was at stake. Looking back, I realize my real fortune was never the money or business success. My real fortune was discovering I had strength to rebuild from nothing and integrity to do it honestly. They tried to break me, but only made me stronger. They tried to steal my future, but only taught me to value it more. They tried to destroy my reputation, but only showed me who my real friends were. I built my first empire with determination and hard work. I built my second empire with wisdom and perspective. The second one is stronger because it's built on a foundation that can't be shaken by betrayal or destroyed by lies. If this story inspired you or reminded you of the strength inside yourself, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories of survival and comeback. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from nothing? I read every comment and would love to hear your story too. Sometimes the people who hurt us most end up giving us the greatest gift: knowledge of who we really are when everything else is stripped away. My family thought they were destroying me, but they were actually creating the strongest version of myself. And that, more than any amount of money, is a fortune that can never be stolen.